Hi everyone, welcome to the Ravit Show. We are live, and I'm super excited because as we gear up for Microsoft Ignite, we are diving in how Microsoft is shaping the future of data and AI. And there's no better person to help us do that than Shireesh Thota himself, Vice President of Azure Databases at Microsoft. Shirish, it's your debut. Super excited to chat today, and welcome to the Ravit Show.
Well, thank you, Ravit. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me over here.
For sure, Shirish, long due and obviously great things you and your product your team have been building. So I'm excited to chat today. We'll also, obviously be touching a little bit on Microsoft's deep involvement in the PostgreSQL open source community and what's next in the world of databases as AI continues to change how we think about data systems at scale. And I'm pretty sure because you talk to a lot of customers, a lot of community members, you get constant feedback, and you and your team have been building so much in obviously not only just the database but also now there's this era of AI that has kind of come into the game. But just before we get into all of these things and the excitement of Microsoft Ignite as well, I'm just wanting to know a little bit about yourself, and I'm pretty sure my audience would love a quick intro, and then we get into all the details of databases, AI, and much more.
Yeah, no. Firstly, again, I'm very excited to be here. I'm Shireesh Thota. My title is Corporate Vice President of Azure
Nice.
Databases. So effectively, my portfolio includes everything around OLTP operational side of the world at Microsoft, which includes things such as SQL Server, the legendary database that has been going on for several decades and it's one of the most popular, very powerful databases. There's
Right.
a version of SQL Server in the cloud, which we call as Azure SQL. There's various form factors, but Azure SQL too. And then in the cloud, we have another cloud-born database called Cosmos DB, which is a highly differentiated, non-relational NoSQL database. We also
Yes.
have a very strong portfolio of OSS databases in both Postgres as well as MySQL. We are bringing in these databases into Fabric, which is our SaaS platform. So
Yes.
everything OLTP from on-premises to IaaS to PaaS to SaaS. That is what I do here.
I love it. I love it. You're kind of covering a good ground there. So congrats to you and your team for building this up. Obviously, I'm familiar with a lot of products and a lot of, obviously the open source community that's kind of, obviously building stuff. So let's deep dive into, many things. I know there are many announcements that are going to happen at Microsoft Ignite this week. So let's start with, obviously the AI era, right? So how is Microsoft adapting databases for the era of AI? Any thoughts around that, Shirish?
Yeah, this is obviously one of those topics that basically takes a lot of consumes a lot of our energy and cycles, and for
Yeah.
good reasons.
Yep.
So, I think about AI and databases in a few form factors. So, firstly, we want to make sure that whatever the data is inside the databases, it's somewhat enterprise structured data, system
Yep.
of engagement kind of data, all the operational pieces that you generally trust a database to operate and serve and store them carefully. You want to make sure that that's all available to AI, whatever form factor that your AI is in. And you want to make sure that it is accessible to AI in a secure, in a reliable, and of course in a responsible way. And so there are a few ways to go do that. One of the most popular ways is RAG pattern. So you are trying to
Mm.
unlock and empower your LLMs to basically have the context of the data. And so how do you really take advantage of the database that is locked? It's not used in the training phase of an LLM. So LLM doesn't have a clue of, let's say, your company's benefits, for instance. How do you really marry
Right.
the goodness of the foundational data of LLMs with that of the operational data? So that's where RAG pattern comes into picture, and there are different kinds of,
Mm.
RAG. There's a lot of knowledge that you could really bring in from operational data into any LLM prompt effectively. So we do
Yep.
that, and there is a way to do that. The technology behind that is basically what we call as vector indexing, and that is really the workhorse of many of these capabilities. And we infuse vector indexing into every database that we have. We're strong
Mm-hmm.
believers that this needs to be exactly at the place where your operational data is, instead of thinking about it as an outside thing. If your data is inside a database, you really should be able to do vector indexing, vector search inline. You shouldn't have to move the data out somewhere else and do that. So that is a very important, a very real, and a very pragmatic pattern that's emerged, and we definitely serve that. In addition to that, There are various ways to think about it, but a simpler way
Mm-hmm.
to think about it is how are we using AI to basically make databases really serve the existing cohort of customers in
Very
terms of
important.
really just refining the query index, query capabilities, automatically engaging in tuning your performance,
Right.
your security, repairs, etc. That's one way to look at it. We haven't had these kinds of very powerful tools. Now we have them. How are you really
Mm.
enhancing? The other way to look at it is our customers are trying to build agentic apps. How are you helping them build those agentic apps on top of a database? And these two scenarios bring up different kinds of examples. So a few examples I would touch on instead of without taking too much time.
No
um,
worries.
when you are thinking about relational databases, index tuning is a big deal, and it
For
comes
sure.
up quite often. And so, what used to be a heuristic way of indexing tuning now can be done with a deeper understanding of morals and deeper understanding of really AI-based understanding of your workloads. And you could even give an instance optimized kind of an experience for database workloads. That's a big deal. On the other hand, we plug in copilots across the board. So if a DBA wants to
Very
come in and
important.
ask the question, hey, why is my query slow? It could be a simple thing as your indexing is missing, but it could also be a very deep thing like, something is blocking. Maybe there's a deadlock in the engine. And Copilot can go and figure all those things and give it to you. So thereby
Yes.
making the life of DBAs, developer architects, etc., much simpler. And then we also really go embed all these experiences deeply into VS Code extensions, NL to QL, where you're just trying
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
mass prompt. So it's a large spectrum, and we are making sure that every application, whoever needs state, which definitely requires databases, get the modern experience of really all the power of Microsoft's AI capabilities, and we're pushing it across all databases. In addition to
Nice.
evolving database architecture into the AI era. That is just internally getting better and better, as
Mm-hmm.
well as giving the external benefit to the customer. So that's kind of really how I see AI
I
function.
I love it. I love these insights in Shirish. Definitely great points there and great way to obviously use AI era to make DBS life easy, but at the same time creating that modern practice not only just internally but for the
Yes.
community as well is very important, and you all are doing it the right way. I'm kind of also curious to know a little bit about the key differences, right? We talk a lot about things that obviously Microsoft and the Azure Database has. But what are like those key differentiators when it comes to Azure Database offerings? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so obviously we have been in the business of databases for several decades. In fact,
Right.
it goes all the way back to 1989 when we started thinking about
Hmm.
SQL Server and when we announced SQL Server support. And ever since, we have made lots of releases of SQL Server, relational databases, and we've certainly engaged in the non-relational space with NoSQL, and now with open source.
Right.
We've embraced open source quite aggressively. In terms of differentiations, I'll touch on a few things. If you think about the portfolio of Azure databases, unlike some other products, databases, there's no one solution, there's no one tool that fits it all. You definitely
Right.
need, in some cases, a good relational database that you probably want to use it on the edge. In some cases, you want to have a very large scale, absolutely user facing, internet scale, horizontally growing, geographically replicated, and highly available kind of a system, which is generally on the spectrum of NoSQL kind of databases. In some cases, you want the power of open source ecosystem. So you want a vendor that basically doesn't give you just one thing and says that this is it, everything needs to work here or bust. We offer you a portfolio that's very comprehensive. In fact, we are the
Right.
only vendor that basically has the on-prem support, which is of course SQL Server. You can have the database on the edge. You build once and you could deploy everywhere. You could be
Everywhere.
on
Right.
premises, your own data centers. You could bring it to Azure, or in fact, any other cloud if you want for SQL. Azure is optimized to run SQL very well, so you could bring what you built in on Edge, and we have many customers who run it on Edge. We have, in fact, that's a large estate of customers who
Nice.
do that. But many of them are moving to the cloud, and we're making it very easy for them to go to the cloud in the modern era. It runs very well in the cloud. We have various form factors IaaS, PaaS, etc. And we are the only vendor that basically have brought in this kind of an enterprise databases into the SaaS era in Fabric. So that is a massive differentiation, because when you come into Microsoft, you're rest assured that you have various tools here in terms of operating with different kinds of needs, be it very traditional ACID functionally rich query engines like relational databases, or OSS databases, or some kind of a non-relational databases. We got it all covered. That's a major
Right.
differentiation. The other few things that I would call out is that we, of course, as Microsoft, we are basically blessed to have an ecosystem that's very rich in terms of developer tools, in terms of AI ecosystems, etc., let alone the security foundations and all those.
Mm-hmm.
We plug in our databases into each and every piece very methodically. We want to
Right.
make sure that you get the best of our Defender for Azure, as an example. We plug into Azure Foundry very well. If your data is basically sort of really large and you want to tier it, you could tier it into one lake in Fabric, thereby getting the analytical insights
Right.
at the pace that your operational data moves. And so that's another.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this whole ecosystem, I haven't even touched on the developer experiences. You think about the GitHub experiences, the GitHub
Yeah.
Copilot experiences, the VS Code extensions that we've built. All those
Massive.
pieces really amplify all of the benefits that you generally get from databases. And so, yeah, all the initiatives that we have at the company in terms of security compliance, developer experiences, in terms of various AI initiatives like Foundry, they all amplify and help you build a platform that is a truly much richer than anything else. And then there are lots of different innovations that we've been deeply plugging into the engine, into the query engines, of course, various resiliency, security, and AI fronts, which I'm happy to go further. But these are a few.
No, yeah, I love it. I love these insights, Shirish, and thanks for giving us in depth about how innovations are happening. But at the same time, it's always good to know about the differentiators and how you all are the ones which are kind of obviously making that difference for the DBAs, for the architects out there. I'm kind of also wanting to touch a little bit on Microsoft Fabric, right? That's a huge one. Obviously, I've spoken to Dipti as well and the team and learned so much about it. So Microsoft Unified Data Platform is the talk of the town since the time it has been, obviously announced. And I'm wanting to know what role do Azure Databases services play in Fabric because that is an important, very important piece for the existing customers, but for those who are also wanting to come on board.
I love that you basically started out talking about Fabric as a unified data platform. That's exactly right. When Fabric was born, we kind of
Mm-hmm.
talked about it as a unified analytics platform, but we've evolved in the very short window that we've announced Fabric. We've already evolved it into becoming a Fabric as a unified data platform. The reason is
Nice.
because the reason is because we brought in operational systems also into Fabric. The majority one, of course, includes databases. So when you bring in operational databases into Fabric, a couple of things happen. So firstly, we have something called Fabric connected or Fabric integrated databases. Everything
Mm-hmm.
that I talked about, the PaaS offerings, the IaaS offerings, including the on-prem offerings, they can all basically benefit from Fabric by mirroring the data into one lake. Mirroring effectively is a continual, a seamless fashion of moving the data in near real time without any
Yep.
ETL from your operational data without impacting your operational workloads. And that's the promise. And by the way, when the data comes into one lake, it is free of charge. The storage is free. And once it
Nice.
hits one lake, you basically can multiply so many scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Scenarios such as you could cross join across different databases. Imagine having a SQL database and a Cosmos DB database. You're mirroring both this data. You may have some kind of a user facing data in Cosmos. You may have some kind of a system of record kind of a data in SQL. When they both hit one lake, you basically could cross join. You could gather insights, all of that stuff using the analytical endpoints on one lake. You could generate reports on that data. You could do deeper data science, data engineering on that data. All of that
Nice.
is easier because all of the data is in one lake, which is the beating heart of Fabric. And that's really the one-stop shop of everything that comes into Fabric. And it is all in the same open format. And so that kind of helps really normalize and apply different kinds of compute engines on top very seamlessly. You could even reverse sort of move the data back from the one lake into a serving layer into some of these
Nice.
relational databases to serve them, etc. So that's mirroring. In addition to that, we also have something called Fabric native databases. There's Fabric connected or Fabric integrated, and then Fabric native. Fabric
Yep.
native databases are basically a completely a, a ground up rethought in terms of how we think about databases. The most important tagline here is that these are SaaS databases. So what is a SaaS database? Ultimately, SaaS is really all about time to reducing the time to value for the developers. The
Right.
developers they're all very busy trying to do AI based applications, Gen AI intelligent applications, and it's not fair to ask them to really go peek under the hood and try and manage the different kinds of operations for a database in terms of, hey, you need to do a database maintenance, administration, etc. There's some amount of it always, but we want to reduce that significantly so that they can increase their time in building the apps, and databases come along the right. So to do that, we basically
Hmm.
picked a few principles. We want to make the database deployment, management, and the whole operations of the life cycle to be simple. Simple, it doesn't mean that we are reducing the power of it. So if you think about SQL, for
Yep.
example, or even Cosmos DB, you have the full power of the database in SaaS, but the experience that you start with in terms of deploying, in terms of experiencing it, is very simple, and it is basically integrated into the existing tenant and workspace management. So
Right.
if you basically have an HA policy or a security policy, a CMK policy, or whatever you want to have it, those are all basically sort of like really just come through into the artifacts under the workspace, including databases. So you don't have to worry about
Hmm.
complex configurations and all that stuff. It's very simple. Deployments are easier, and so that whole CI/CD is plugged in. Every artifact operates in a very similar principle. So the whole experience is simple. And then the second thing is what we call as autonomous. Now, again, autonomous is important because in this era of AI, we have to do our part in terms of making it easier
Yeah.
for administration, but really important to make it self-secure, self-repair, self-optimized, and that kind of stuff. So that
Totally.
is another principle. The third principle is that it's optimized for AI. Naturally, we want to make sure that any applications that you build anywhere, including SaaS, etc., just works through. But Fabric has a ton of AI constructs in terms of the ability to basically really seamlessly integrate and work with different kinds of components. There are AI skillings that are available inside Fabric. It integrates into Foundry very well. We want to make sure that databases in Fabric really take those benefits.
Yep.
So these are a few principles that are very distinct from past databases. So that is why this
Mm.
is a new paradigm, and we're super excited about this.
Love it. Now I know why you'll call it Microsoft Unified Data Platform. So thanks for giving us
Yeah,
in depth about how Azure databases also play a great role in the fabric. Let's touch a
right.
little bit on. I know we spoke about obviously Microsoft is infusing AI directly into databases, but from a customer perspective, I'm kind of curious to know. How are Microsoft offering data offerings enabling agentic AI?
Hmm.
Because that's a very important piece, Shirish, that we haven't touched on. So, would love to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts around that.
That's a great question, Ravit. One of the things that we see quite often is that a lot of the customers are basically building a lot of the tools for their employees first, and before they basically roll it out to their customers.
Yes,
And
for sure.
a very common thing that the customers generally tend to do as sort of like getting started is some kind of like a knowledge chat bots or something like that.
Hmm.
It makes
Right.
it easier for the developers or employees to basically become more productive. And that's precisely what we've been doing, what we have been offering and making it easier for them. So if you look at Cosmos DB, for instance, it empowers many of those chatbots. KPMG is an example where they have built this thing called KimChat, which is totally built on our Cosmos DB as
Oh, nice.
Mongo API, which is basically really making it easier for them to go build these kinds of chatbots. And that's just an
Nice.
example. There are a lot of customers. We have another customer called Connectify who are basically building real-time fraud detection in line with the operational data. You could obviously
Love
do
it.
these kinds of solutions in 20 different ways, but you want to make it easier because AI can be infused into the system. There are
Mm,
developers and DBAs who are using our co-pilots to make their life much easier, because they can now really chat with the database in a much more seamless way. Instead of thinking of it as some kind of a black box, you could really go in, and you don't need to be a wizard in terms of understanding the various parts of the engine. So that's another example.
nice.
Uh, on the other hand, we do have many customers who really are engaging in the RAG patterns, as I said, graph rag, rag, etc. This is a very common pattern. They want to enhance their existing enterprise data so that the customers of their data could take advantage of that data in conjunction with the
Nice.
LLM, prompts or whatever. So these are all a few of the really good examples. But one thing is very clear: none of these things would work without the foundational pieces of operational databases.
Hmm.
When I say foundational pieces, I'm talking about resiliency, scale, reliability, and many
Totally.
things, right? So a very good example, again, as I said, was that ChatGPT, one of the prolific applications of the modern world, runs
Mm-hmm.
in Cosmos DB. And the reason why
Wow.
it is possible is because it is truly offering everything that they need in terms of scale, which can go from a few gigabytes to a petabytes of data in a linear fashion. We can
True.
be multiple regions available. So even if you want to one writer, multiple readers, no problem. If you want multiple writers, multiple readers, that's possible. So the elasticity, high availability, and the schema flexibility of Cosmos DB enables these kinds of planet scale, extremely prolific AI applications. On the other hand, we have many customers who want to take advantage of the power of a relational query engine in
Right.
conjunction with vector indexing. So they want to have a filtered indexing of, they may have a few general predicates, maybe the price is this, rating is this, and give me a book that looks like this. The book that looks like this is a semantic search, vector
Right.
indexing, but the other pieces are like general predicates, general b-tree indexes. How do you combine this effectively? And these are the places that we basically see customers generally evolving. And we've definitely started innovating deeply in terms of pushing in these kinds of AI pieces as built-in functions into the query. We're definitely trying to enable agentic experiences deep inside the database. So it's a very exciting time, and the differentiations and the customer experiences that we are bringing in, it's just awesome. We are very thrilled about it.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting times we're living in, and what we're building, like I see, is extraordinary. And what I love about, obviously the stuff that y'all are doing is these are highly regulated industries y'all are working with, and the importance of, agentic AI to get their work faster is important more than ever. I was actually talking to someone from healthcare, and they're like, we're actually saving lives, more lives than ever. And this person works from NHS. All right. So we are seeing those sort of, life saving technology that is being built through AI and agentic AI as well, which is just so phenomenal to see. So I'm also wanting to learn a little bit about, what opportunities do you see in the next wave of database innovations? What capabilities will matter the most? Because not only just that you talk to a lot of developers, but you also talk to a lot of enterprise leaders. You, like I said, you work with a lot of healthcare, finance, and these regulated industries. So, kind of curious to know your thoughts around the innovations in the future.
So, at Microsoft, we really want to make sure that we always begin anything that we're talking about with two things. It's security comes first, and then quality immediately follows through. And
Right.
and it is very true, perhaps more true for databases than anything else. So even before we talk about some of the newer experiences that we want to bring in, and of course we will absolutely, but anything that we do, what we have provided earlier, what we are going to provide in the future, we want to make sure that the foundations of security and resiliency are super solid. And there's a lot that we can be doing here in terms of databases. The game
Mm,
of moving databases into cloud has only just begun, in my opinion. There's definitely a lot of movement, but
nice.
the hardware innovations have picked up. The scale effects of the new topologies, etc., have
Yep.
started happening. The workloads are changing massively. If you kind of bring all these pieces together, there are a couple of things that we must think about. what used to be bottlenecks for databases a few years ago are not the same now. CPUs had the problems of like, hey, latches, deadlocks, etc. used to be the problem in the past. Now it's about communications, networking, and those kinds of problems. And how do we really make sure that databases are evolving? And so I'm very excited about innovations in that space. We're certainly leaning in quite a bit. AI is something that we touched on. We do have very differentiated aspects of AI, things such as ANN indexing. How do we push in our agentic experiences inside the database? How do we really enable the modern RAG experiences? Just working agent to agent experiences in a setup like a Foundry to databases, Fabric, exploiting that. Those are all really important, and they're going to unlock many customer scenarios. Ultimately, though, the customers really need to succeed both on their resiliency, security aspect,
Yes.
upon which they can then go very freely go and exploit the AI experiences. So that's kind of really where my head is and what my team is truly focused on.
I love it. This is great, Shirish. Because you touched on the topic of AI as well, how do you expect AI to continue to reshape not only just the core database operations, but also the performance? How will that scale up? A little bit around that would be interesting.
Yeah, so as I said, there are two kinds of challenges here. There's one challenge which is basically within a regular traditional database problems, which are really, how do you tune it per workload? Every workload is slightly different. If you think about OSS databases, there are
Mm-hmm.
definitely tons of parameters that you have to tune per workload. So instead of thinking of it as like I offered a service, you have to offer a service per workload, and that means that you're really deeply understanding the service characteristics and how you're tuning that. And so we are definitely looking into that aspect of like instance optimized experiences. A lot of good work has happened in the past in this space, but there's a lot of machine learning that can be applied in this space. Then there is certainly an aspect of really enabling how just simplify the experiences for our core cohort of customers, DBAs, developers, etc. uh,
Right.
Simplify even things such as moving their workloads from our on-premises to the cloud. How do I move from a legacy experiences of a database into the modern database? Let's say if some customer wants to move from Oracle to PostgreSQL, we want to make it very easy, because
Right.
AI can really enable not just the database schema mapping, that's easy, but the entire end-to-end, all the way from application across their estate. It's not just one database. They may have lots of applications, lots of instances. How do you really simplify that workflow? So agentic experiences to really go do the migrations and then
Yes.
modernize them. And then once it is modernized in the cloud, you really should have a mechanism to have like some kind of an agent that's constantly optimizing, not one and done, but it is a loop that is
Exactly.
like, you can go to sleep, but your agent is constantly 24/7 working, right? How do we really make that possible? And that's kind of really where we're focused on.
I love it. These are fantastic insights, and thanks for sharing it, Shirish, and giving us a little bit around the innovations that are going to happen in the future and what you all are focused on. This was actually a fascinating curtain raiser for Microsoft Ignite this week. I'm excited to be there in person. I'll be obviously, keeping a tap on all the announcements and sharing with our audience, but also making sure that I'm catching up with leaders like yourself, and it would be great to meet in person for sure. One last thing that I wanted to ask Shirish is, I know you and your team kind of put out a lot of content out there for the audience, and you all keep putting out a lot of documentation as well. If folks want to follow it, which is the best place? If they want to follow you, obviously see all the announcements, which is the best place? LinkedIn, X, where are you most active?
I'm generally very active on LinkedIn, at least
Nice.
to the extent that it is. So yeah, so LinkedIn, just Shireesh Thota, one word. I'm also on Twitter, on X, which is Shireesh Thota, same handle, just one word, Shireesh Thota.
Okay.
And we do put a lot of good blogs on Microsoft sites. If you just follow me on LinkedIn, Shireesh Thota, that's my handle. Yeah, now you'll definitely see many exciting things coming at Ignite. We really can't wait to share all the good things that we have been building over the several months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here. We can't wait. Obviously, it would be great 4 days of Ignite that's gonna happen. So looking forward to it. But thanks once again, Shirish, for doing this, for coming on the Ravit show, giving us a fantastic curtain raiser here just before Microsoft Ignite. And huge thanks to everyone who have joined today. Stay tuned and join, obviously, Microsoft Ignite. If you can meet in person, feel free to say hi. I'll be on ground doing interviews, but also if you're joining in virtually, please do that. We have only scratched the surface of what's coming at Ignite, from the latest in Azure Database innovations to agentic AI to Microsoft Fabric. So make sure you tune in and look out for all the announcements. Thanks, Shirish, for doing this, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Ravit, for having me here.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Take care.
Thank you.